Hello, welcome to a new episode of NuReview. This is Tyler King here. Today I'm doing a review of the 1994 Gary Numan album, Sacrifice. Sacrifice is released in October of 1994. It represents a complete stylistic and lyrical shift in Gary Numan's musical career from trying to get on the radio, which is what he was basically trying to do from, I could say, On Metal Rhythm, Outland, and Machine and Soul, to making the music that he wanted to make, regardless of whether or not it ended up getting radio play, and the result is Sacrifice. He on this album, he single-handedly rejects pretty much every musical trope he had squeezed to death over the last 10 or so years of his career. No more backing vocalists, no more synth-funk stylings, no more saxophone solos. Thank God. In its place is Sacrifice, which is a very dark, a very brooding, industrial rock album where every instrument is going to be played by Gary, it's going to be self-produced, and it's going to be self-recorded in his home studio. Save for some guitar on Scar, and some synth bass on Love and Napalm by Kipper, and backing vocals on the song Scar by TJ Davis, this is just like a complete solo Gary Numan album. Like, there's nothing else going on here that is not by him. And I'm jumping around, I'm becoming the human bobblehead yet again, but I'm so excited that I finally made it to this point. Let's go ahead, review Sacrifice. Let's go. The album opens with Pray, and Pray does have an ominous feeling to it, like something like Interval 1 had from the Outland album, but on Pray you feel a little bit more darker, a little bit more sense of foreboding than you did with Interval 1. Gary's talking over these very ominous synth lines in a heavily distorted voice for the better part of 2 minutes. He's talking about praying to the maker of things before a mid-tempo drum machine beat comes in and the song picks itself up. And right off the bat, lyrically, you get Gary's disdain towards religion with the line, "Maker, we are the rage that feeds your devotion." The song serves almost as kind of a two-part intro to the album, and right off the bat, you know this has a completely different feeling than something like Machine and Soul or Outland had. The next song is going to be Deadliner. It's a mid-tempo number that opens with some very plaintive piano being played under this very driving industrial beat. And this song introduces a couple of lyrical themes that are going to be go-tos of Gary's for the next 20 plus years of his career, and those are themes of not being alone in the dark and not being able to breathe. The vocal melody is basically spoken word until the chorus comes in, and under a little bit more piano, Gary sings, "Sometimes it almost makes me cry, sometimes it seems to call my name out loud," and the power of just that part coming in is something that was sorely lacking from just about anything he had done from the last 12 or 13 years. I mean, lyrically, the whole song is really about this nightmare that Gary is having, and it gets to the point where Gary sings, "I can't believe that God would do this to me," and it's so good. Following this, we have A Question of Faith, which is the first single that's released from the album. It has a more frantic sounding intro before this very fast driving beat comes in that's accentuated by these very dark synth stabs. And another thing about Sacrifice is that with almost every song on this album, the drum beat never changes, and instrumentally, kind of what you get for the first 30 seconds or 60 seconds is really what you're going to have for the remainder of the song. But with a song like A Question of Faith, the music is so good, the vocal delivery so strong, the lyrics so great, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, by the time he gets to the chorus where he sings, "They say I sold my soul, we'll all reap what we sow," just like with Deadliner, like there's so much power and conviction behind it. Like it's just a very good feeling to have the old Gary Numan back. And the final verse in this song is one of my favorite verses in any Gary Numan song ever. And he basically says, when children kill children, doesn't it make them question their faith? And he's asking this in regard of people who kind of enforce religion on others or who vehemently defend religion. Gary is saying, well, what about children killing children? Is that something that God would want to have done? And how could a God allow this to happen? The next song is Desire, which opens with a very loud drum beat, which then is met with this very hi-hat centered drum beat. That goes on for about the better part of a minute or so before Gary sings, "Is this desire or is this a disease?" And like I mentioned with A Question of Faith, there is little or no variation to the instrumentation on this song. But because of that, at least with Desire in particular, it does give it almost a dark wave feel. And the song doesn't feel as finished or polished as something like Deadliner or A Question of Faith, but it doesn't necessarily suffer for it. I think that it actually fits it in a way. Following Desire, we have Scar, and Scar is the one song on Sacrifice that sounds like it could have been a leftover from the last couple of albums. Part of that is because it's a little bit faster. There's a very fast vocal delivery on it, and the backing vocals of Save My Soul. And oddly, this is probably the most accessible song on the album, but it was not chosen as a single. The squalling guitar, courtesy of Kipper, finally matches the music, and the lyrics finally also match the music, and it's so refreshing that Gary is finally making the music he wants to instead of something like The Skin Game. Following that, we have Love and Napalm, which opens with this very heavy, distorted guitar intro. It's a little reminiscent of something like The Mockman from the Replicas album, and once Gary does start singing, he opens with the line, "Call me Deadliner," referencing the second song on the album. Unlike pretty much every song so far, the drums on here actually feel live, and there is guitar throughout the entire song. The song also features one of my favorite lines on the album, "The broken sound of love and lies still fills your room." The chorus is especially strong here, and the bridge with these very stadium-feeling drums accentuated by this guitar and these plaintive piano lines really makes Love and Napalm a very standout track on this album. Following that, you have You Walk in My Soul, which is the first ballad on the album. It is a song that is about his then girlfriend, future wife, Gemma O'Neill. And like pretty much all of his ballads over the last 10 years or so, there's very gentle piano line under the vocals. There's some choiry synth effects going on as well. I don't think it necessarily fits in with the rest of the songs on the album, at least lyrically or thematically, but as far as ballads go, it's refreshing to finally hear one by Gary where he's not singing about a breakup or a dissolution of a relationship. And as far as sincerity and heartfelt performances go, this is probably going to be one of his better ballads of the next 20 years. Next we have Magic, which opens very similarly to the opening song Pray, before this drum part comes in, and it turns into a much faster song than Pray was. But despite its faster tempo, it still sounds a little bit ballad-like because of the slower vocal delivery and the piano melody that's played throughout it. The song reads like him questioning God, asking if I believed, if I should wonder, If I forgive, then would you come for me? One of my favorite parts comes in about 5 minutes into the song of Gary going hey over the swelling building instrumentation, and it's very easy to see why this song in particular was chosen as a single for the album. Following this we have Bleed, which opens with some very cool dissonant hissing and beeping for the better part of a full minute. Finally, this very simple drum rhythm comes in before it's replaced by this very beefy stadium level drums like from Love and Napalm. And the opening lines, someone is talking, but it's not conversation, is one of my favorite lines on the entire album. It's so good. And the chorus as well is very amazing, and it relates back to the theme of nightmares, like he did with the song Deadliner. There's some harsh synth lines that accentuate the percussion, as well as some guitar played throughout, and some soft piano, which, you know, after listening to this album, that kind of is the whole sonic palette of this album, is going to be this drum machine that just is repeating, piano, some harsher synthesizer sounds, and a little bit of guitar. And that's really, those are the instruments that are on this album. And then finally we have The Seed of a Lie, which again has this very ominous opening before we're treated to these very heavy, brooding synth pads, some more drum machine stuff, and these choral keys in the background. Unlike almost every song here, You Walk in My Soul excluded, there is no anti-God sentiment, and as the song goes on, we're treated to some gentle swelling synths that come up under Gary's vocals. And at the end of the song we find out it is another post-breakup song, but like Love Isolation on the previous album, Machine and Soul, it doesn't detract from the song or the instrumentation. And even though I generally dislike saving the last album on a song for a ballad, uh, Seed of a Lie is actually kind of a fitting end to Sacrifice. And that's Sacrifice. So, personal feelings about Sacrifice. I feel very positive about it, in case you can't tell. This really is the strongest Gary Numan album, I think, since Dance, which came out 13 years previously to this in 1981. Gary seems confident, his lyrics are strong, his vocal delivery is strong. The instrumentation is a little bit samey song to song. I can see how some people would dislike that. To me, I do think that each song does stand out on its own. However, the production has not really aged that well, like most industrial or EBM albums from the late 80s or early 90s. That being said, though, I do think that this is one of Gary's strongest albums. I wouldn't necessarily put this in my top 5, but I would probably put this happily in my top 10 Gary Numan albums. It's a very welcome return to form. I mean, if he had stopped making albums pretty much from I Assassin up through Machine and Soul and released Sacrifice after a 13-year-long gap, you could see it almost as a direct continuation of an album like Dance. Dance is very brooding, it's very ominous, and I think that so is Sacrifice. I think that there are a few similarities between the two of them instrumentally. Long open passages where it's just percussion, very personal lyrics, and I have nothing but good things to say about this album. My only real complaint is going to be I don't think necessarily that Pray should be as long as it is. I don't necessarily think that The Seed of a Lie is one of the better choices of songs to be put on this album. There's a B-side from this album called Absolution that is phenomenal. You'll hear about that in my review of the album Exile. But overall, this is a very fine and strong return to form by Gary Numan, especially following the practical career suicide of the trio of metal rhythm, Outland, and Machine and Soul. It's a strong album. Sacrifice is an album that I go back to often, and it's just a really fucking good album. Top songs on here are definitely going to be A Question of Faith, Deadliner, Magic, Bleed. Um, Least favorite songs are probably going to be Pray, You Walk in My Soul, and The Seed of a Lie. But overall, this is a very strong album. Uh, I would go so far as to give it an 8 out of 10. And that's my review of Sacrifice. Do you love it? Did you hate it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave any and all comments in the comment box below. I am going to next do my review of Gary Numan's 1997 album Exile that is going to be put up shortly. In the meantime, this is Tyler King with NuReview. Sacrifice by Gary Numan, 8 out of 10.